Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jesselnor in Baltimore. President Obama is seeking to fortify the Iran nuclear deal before leaving office, the Wall Street Journal is reporting, with the expectation President-elect Trump may follow through on his campaign promise to undo the deal. Trump's pick to head the CIA, Mike Pompeo, echoed Trump's criticism of the deal and now says he looks forward to, quote, rolling back the disastrous deal with the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. Well, now joining us to discuss this is Robert Kelley. He's a former nuclear weapons analyst at Los Alamos National Laboratory and a former director at the IAEA. Thanks so much for joining us again.
Good evening.
So Fox News reported on November 10th, along with several other media outlets, that, quote, Iran violated one of the terms of its nuclear deal signed with the 6 world powers by exceeding a limit on its heavy water stockpile. And that's according to a report from the UN monitors on Wednesday. The confidential report was seen by the Associated Press. The article went on to say the deal specifies a heavy water limit of 143.3 tons. The IAEA found Iran's stockpile exceeded that amount by 0.1 metric tons, continuing that it marked the second time Iran stepped over to the limit, according to investigators. So give us your response to this news, and it comes at a time when Trump and his advisors are really, and throughout the campaign, have sort of set sights on this deal. And it's unclear what's going to happen now, but that is the context that this report was released on November 10th.
Well, it's clearly politically motivated rhetoric. It's not true that there was a violation, because the violation would assume there was a limit. The numbers you gave a second ago didn't sound right, but let's go with that anyway. There's been a very small exceeding of a limit that was agreed to that is not part of the main treaty. It's not actually a treaty, it's an agreement or a Security Council resolution. Let's say that you, as an individual, make a will. You go to your lawyer, you make the will, it's countersigned, you pay the lawyer, but you can have a codicil on the side that says there are some things outside the will that I can change without changing the whole will. And that's what's going on here. There's a codicil that the two sides have agreed that there will be a limit at which Iran will say, I don't really need any more of this material, and I'll sell any excess. And what's happened is they've reached that limit. They've gone over it by 100 kilograms, and they have already, in fact, sold the 5 tons of material. So this whole thing is a tempest in a teapot. They're way under the agreed-upon limit anyway. That's not a violation. It's an agreed-upon thing that's outside of the main agreement. Remember, there was a lot of fuss here a few months ago that there were so-called secret side agreements. Well, we have to assume that in those secret side agreements, there are some agreements about, well, if you go over by a little bit, then we'll have to do something about it. If you go back to the Threshold Test Ban Treaty, the two sides were negotiating there. They were scientists. And in the records of that treaty negotiation, they say very clearly, we as technical people know sometimes you overshoot by a little bit, and a couple times a year is no big deal. That's probably in these same side agreements, and it's really very, very dishonest of people to call this a violation.
And so, can you comment a little about the timing of that report as well?
I don't think that the Director General had any choice. He does a quarterly report, and unfortunately it came close to the election. But I don't see that the timing of it, other than using the word concern, really was very important. He had to issue that report at that time.
And so I wanted to play a clip of former Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, speaking on Fox News about the Iran nuclear deal. He's one of the people considered for a post in the Trump administration.
Well, I've said consistently, I think this deal is a strategic disaster for the United States. I think the sooner we get out of it, the better. I think in the opening days of the administration, he should make that clear. And I reject this argument that somehow we should try to hold the Ayatollahs to the strict terms of the deal and let them try to withdraw from it. Number one, this deal is going to crater at some point, and the notion that we allow them to determine when they withdraw from it to put our interest in their hands in terms of timing, I think is a mistake.
So that's John Bolton saying the deal is going to fall apart anyway. It's better we withdraw on it from our terms. And he went on to say, you know, it was going to help avoid the Europeans getting further entrenched, because with the lifting of some of the sanctions, there's been more trade between Iran and the Europeans. What's your response to that?
Well, look at John Bolton. And John Bolton's a failed ambassador. He couldn't even be confirmed. He had to be confirmed on a recess appointment. He lasted just a matter of months. He's a war hawk. He's demanding bombing. He'll look for any excuse he can to try to make the Iranians look bad, try to make the IAEA look bad, and in the process get his wish of going to bomb. The deal is a pretty good deal. And the Iranians have stuck to it now for a year officially, and longer than that if you count the run-up to the deal being put in place. It's working great. People like Netanyahu are saying, let it run. People like Chuck Schumer are saying, let it run. We need to see it for a longer period. So Bolton is polar. He's way out there on the edge, and he's entitled to his opinion. He just happens to be wrong in mine.
And so for our viewers, can you just explain to us what would happen if the deal is undone by the U.S. or Iran? What would happen next? What would happen as far as Iran's nuclear capabilities? They'd be free to build a nuclear weapon if they chose to. Is that correct?
Iran is free to build a nuclear weapon under normal circumstances without this deal. It's not prohibited under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They would have to simply report that they're doing it. So it's kind of, I find that kind of a very theoretical question, and one that's really off the mark. If the Americans want to try to put Iran back in the box again, and Iran says, well, the only way that I can fight back is to try to build a nuclear weapon, then maybe they'll do that. They have other ways of trying to respond.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Robert Kelley, former nuclear weapons analyst at Los Alamos National Laboratory, former director at the IAEA.
Good night.
Thank you for joining us at the Real News Network.